Okay, Dad, today is Monday, April 8th, and what's going on in the world today?
Well, this is the day of the great North American eclipse. In fact, it's happening as we speak. We're not in the direct path, but we'll have a partial eclipse here in our secret location somewhere on the North American continent.
It's also the day that I'm going to be going to the hospital with my wife for the birth of my second son right after this. So, big day. But let's talk about what's going on in the world. What's going on now that we want to talk about? Something with Iran or Ukraine? Where do we want to start?
You can start anywhere.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess in the case of Iran, we're just still waiting to see if Iran will retaliate sometime soon. Um, there was a belief, anyway, the expectation in the mainstream media, anyway, that Iran was going to retaliate within 48 hours,
mhm.
um, soon after the attack on the consulate in Damascus. But obviously that didn't happen. And Iran made it clear that they're going to retaliate in some fashion or another. But again, it just, they'll do it in a way of their choosing, when the opportune moment arises.
That's got to make tensions pretty high in Israel. It's
Yeah.
like waiting for this. Iran said they'll be delivering a slap in the face. So it's like they have that slap in the box ready to deliver, but nobody knows when it's going to happen. So you're just sitting around waiting for that blow. Um,
Yeah.
how are people in Israel handling this?
Well, I don't. I've seen images, pictures of Israelis in air raid shelters. There was I'm sure they're out of the air raid shelters now, but there was a real fear. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's
I've been seeing these mass protests in Tel Aviv. Do you know what that's all about?
my understanding is, yeah, they're anti Netanyahu protests. They're not anti-war protests. That it would be a mistake to think that there really isn't any kind of anti-war movement or opposition of any significance in Israel right now. But there is still a lot of a lot very powerful sentiment, anti-Netanyahu sentiment. This is all about domestic politics and about the hostages. I think those are the two main issues here. Before October 7th, there were a number of actually very large protests against Netanyahu. They're mainly protests against his efforts to kind of reduce the independence of the Supreme Court in Israel. And I think he was doing that for personal reasons, that he didn't want himself to be investigated.
Mhm.
So, a lot of Israelis were angry about that and still are. And they do want to see him gone. And then there's a lot of anger, among the families of the hostages, because they don't see any results there. They see Gaza being destroyed, and they may not care one way or another about that, but they definitely want to see their family members home, and they haven't. He hasn't delivered on that promise of freeing the hostages.
Do
So
you think
that's
it's because he doesn't? It's not a priority for him. Like, what could he be doing
yeah.
to get the hostages home? You see
Well,
this a lot.
oh
Like,
yeah,
bring them home. I see this on Twitter, and it's got to be terrifying if you have a family member
sure.
that's being held hostage. So what can be done on that front?
But yeah, well, obviously you have to negotiate. I
Mm.
mean, that's the thing. I think it's virtually impossible to free them by military force. If you attempt to just use, the the bluntest instrument of the army, you're going to kill them in the process.
Have some of the hostages been killed by the IDF already through the bombings?
Oh yes, definitely. And there were actually three that were killed by direct gunfire, even though they had waved a white flag and were standing there shirtless outside, but they were gunned down by Israeli
So
soldiers.
they were hostages, but they were just shirtless
Yeah, they had
outside.
somehow managed to escape their captors and were outside, and they, the Israeli soldiers were nearby, and then one of them they're standing there shirtless, shouting in Hebrew, and they were gunned down. One of them was waving a white flag.
Why
So,
why would they do that?
well, I think I don't know if they understood that these were in fact Israeli hostages. It's not. I don't think they would, if they had a chance to, to now that they were free of their captors. I think they would probably, gladly take them into not into custody, but to to bring them back home. But it was probably a mistake. Just
Mm,
the problem here, obviously, though, is that these people are just given the soldiers are given orders to shoot indiscriminately. Not to stop and think about who you're killing, but just to kill them all. And
right.
so, that they were in that frame of mind. So when they saw people, they didn't stop to think about it. Obviously they didn't care if they were civilians,
So
and
you,
they were unarmed, but they gunned them down.
do you think the IDF has any real desire or goal to recover these hostages, or that's not even something that they're even trying
Well,
to
I
go
mean,
and
yeah,
do?
what they're doing doesn't seem to. I don't see how that would help them to recover the hostages. I mean, it's leveling entire, you know, apartment blocks and so forth. What's to prevent you from killing hostages in the process? When if you're killing this, destroying the entire civilian infrastructure and killing civilians by the thousands,
Mm.
it's quite likely that you're going to kill some hostages in the process. Again, it seems to me that clearly the only way to get hostages is through negotiations.
I've heard that there have been attempts at negotiations, and there was one transfer
Right.
of prisoners before. And so when I watch Twitter, sometimes I see the pro-Israeli side saying that it's Hamas that is refusing to negotiate. Can you explain what's happened with some of these negotiations and why they don't go through? Why there's no ceasefire?
Actually, I just don't know enough about the details to tell you why. Of course, on the other side is that Hamas is asking for the release of Palestinian prisoners. And
Mm,
I think often it's actually a mistake to call them prisoners. They probably should be called hostages too, because they are, simply, a lot of them anyway, are people that are simply grabbed, who
mm.
committed no crime.
And then there's no
Uh,
trial, no
right, right. They're just held
no
in
court date,
detention.
right?
Yeah, so it's often presented as though, here on the one hand, okay, they're the innocent hostages, that Hamas has taken, in violation of international law and so on and so forth, which is true up to a point. You're not supposed to do that. But, Israel has these hundreds and hundreds of so-called prisoners. Well, they are prisoners, but they're not, they haven't committed any crime. And they too are being held in violation of any
Right,
standard of
and I
justice.
think a big issue as well is any ceasefire that's being talked about. It's always a temporary ceasefire, so they might pause for a couple weeks and then it just
Right.
resumes again. So there's
Right.
no permanence to it. So without any kind of permanent solution, I don't see why Hamas would
Right.
give
To
them
turn
up.
them all over. Right. Because
It's
that's the one, it's the one bargaining chip that they have. And if, once they give it up, then there's just nothing, well, nothing, to prevent Israel from, destroying all of Gaza. Well, it may not make a difference to Israel. It doesn't seem to, but, at least Hamas has that hope. It's the only,
mm,
at least in theory, bargaining chip that they have.
mm. Okay. Well, seeing how we're talking about Gaza, and you mentioned, that the IDF has basically been given the orders to kind of shoot indiscriminately. Basically anybody that's in Gaza is a viable target. Um, Maybe we can talk a little bit about this Lavender program, Lavender and Where's Daddy. I don't know if you've heard of.
Where's Daddy? I haven't heard it. Lavender, I know what you're
Okay, I
talking
can tell
about.
you a
Right.
little bit about Where's Daddy. I was just reading an article this morning by, I think his name is Yuval Abraham. He's an Israeli Israeli journalist in Israel. He's Jewish, but he has exposed some pretty scary stuff regarding these AI tools that the IDF is utilizing to basically mass mark Gazans for assassination.
Right.
Um, can you maybe explain a little bit about this Lavender program, and I'll tell you what I know.
Okay. Sure.
So,
Yeah. From what I understand is that it's a program that is supposed to target Hamas operatives or people associated with Hamas. The problem with that is that, okay, that actually turns out to be a very broad net. It ends up encompassing, perhaps a majority, if almost certainly the majority of the Gazan population, because of course, there was it's a Hamas government that runs Gaza. Now everybody, it's not at all unusual for people to be in one way or another associated with Hamas. Maybe you're not. It doesn't mean that you're a member of a Hamas militia, but maybe your uncle works in such and such agency, or your friend is an employee of some Hamas run organization, or maybe you just lent your phone to somebody who's in Hamas, which is again not unusual. It's nothing strange. It's just like in this country, somebody happens to be work for the Democratic Party or works in a government agency or whatever. That accounts for a large part of the population in the U.S. or in any country of the world. That people are going to be some way associated with the government. But let's say you lent somebody a phone because he had to call his kid or something, and that just the fact that a call was made, let's say to, from your phone that you own to a number that is been identified as being Hamas, you're on the list. Or, if your brother or whatever, or, you regularly call or in contact with somebody, again, who's in Hamas. Again, Hamas, we're talking about the government, we're talking about the police, we're talking not just the militia. So you're just talking about a very wide swath of Gazan society. So the end result is that a lot of people end up on this list. And, there's, I think the Israelis created this AI program, Lavender, that is used to identify, again, so-called Hamas affiliated people. And, they play with the definition so much, but you can make just a slight adjustment to the definition of who, let's say, Hamas affiliated person is. And you can, widen the net by many, many tens of thousands of people. So anyway, it's this AI, it's the software itself that makes the decision of who to strike. And the thing too is that because Hamas, the real Hamas, the Hamas fighters are underground. These people are actually beyond the reach of this program. It's the people that are above ground, the civilian population. They're the ones that are vulnerable.
Right.
And they find like the easiest way to get these people is to strike when they're in their homes.
Right.
And when they're in their homes, well, these are, Gazan families tend to be very large, they're extended families. We may be talking about in a apartment or maybe a few apartments together, and maybe, 20 people in this family.
Right.
And okay, one person has been identified according to Lavender to be Hamas affiliated. He goes home at night, and he's in his apartment. And then that night, while everybody's in bed, a missile strikes and all 20 of them are killed. And this is something that's happened again. Or sometimes they just take out the entire apartment block.
Yeah, it's terrifying. AI is taking over the world, and a lot of people talk about, obviously all the great benefits of AI. I play around with AI all the time. But here you can see it, the real scary Terminator kind of dark side of AI. A lot of people talk about China and its social credit system. I can tell you firsthand, after living in China for 10 years, no real social credit system exists. At least nobody's aware of it. Nobody thinks about it. It doesn't affect their daily life at all.
Right.
And I've been in China for a long time, and I was there during the COVID lockdowns and a lot of people protesting on WeChat and social media. There isn't this social credit system that people are aware of, but we have an actual kill list AI being enabled in by the IDF that mass targets. Because what I heard the issue with the IDF was saying is they have a bottleneck in terms of marking targets. But thankfully, this AI program that I think was being developed in 2021, and they're very open about it. You can even see slides about how this AI Lavender system works. That because they were showcasing it at Tel Aviv University. You can see the courses that they have about it. There's been books by Israeli military people talking about how they'll be utilizing this. And from what I understand, um, Lavender is really used to target more low level operatives. So, not even the important people. And like you said, they have a very broad net. What they use is they often use Facebook, social media to identify these people. And like you said, associations with so called Hamas operatives. It's almost hard to even define what is Hamas. And it feels like the IDF just has this broad net anyways. They just assume everybody in Gaza is Hamas or potentially Hamas. So
Yeah, or in a way, everybody is. I mean, again, just
it's your
speaking
government,
broadly, right? Exactly. I mean, this is okay. Yeah, this is the party that runs this particular governs this territory,
Yeah.
and runs the agencies. That employs a very large percentage of the population. Um, yeah. So also, my understanding is that each person is assigned a score. You're speaking of the social credit system,
Right.
okay? Well, this is sort of like a um, not social credit, but like let's say assassination worthiness or something, a score from 0 to 100, and every single individual is, and then AI is just told, to go after, the people with the higher scores, which, again, it's a very large percentage of the population.
Right.
And they just simply took the humans out of the loop, is what I understand. It's just say, okay, yeah, strike this building now. You don't stop and figure out, okay, who's in the building, but AI, Lavender told us to do it.
Right.
Bam, bam, night after night, night after night.
Yeah, just to go, build off that. So they assign a score from 0 to 100. There are no age restrictions for the score. They target, minors, children are part of this system as well. And you were mentioning how they strike them at home. So that's the software. Lavender feeds the software to a program that's called Where's Daddy. And just the fact that it's named Where's Daddy just shows you kind of how sick it is. So what it does is it alerts the system once the target with the high assassination score, which is, like you said, it's not accurate. Even the IDF admits that it's maybe 90%, and we're talking about the term that it gets at 90% right. But what they use the criteria to even classify what a viable target is very sketchy, very broad. Like you said, people will just hand off a phone to their friend or whatever, or just because you hung out with somebody at a dinner party or something like that, you might be associated and you're on this kill list. Don't even know it. So you get home, the system, Where's Daddy, will notify it and will send out the strike, usually in the middle of the night while everyone's sleeping. And like you said, to wipe out the whole family. And I heard that from this Yuval Abraham article, which everybody should read. I think you can find it on 972 Mag. Yuval is UVAL, Abraham. He goes very in depth with this and has all the sources. But he also says that they only spend approximately 20 seconds per target to to say whether it is. So basically, this machine, AI machine that has very questionable input criteria, churns out these names and feeds it to a system called Where's Daddy, and then there's only one person that will just sort of rubber stamp it. Spends about 20 seconds to okay the target, and they have this criteria that says, well, for any target that we strike at a home, if there's 20 innocent people in there as well, then it's okay. And that's kind of a rough thing. They have it there to say that it's okay to kill 20 innocents. So if this person goes home with his family, 10 kids, grandparents, it's okay, take it all out. And what's even more terrifying is that they have the ability to use these what are known as like floor bombs, floor guided missiles that go in and take out just a single floor or room in an apartment building. It'll glide in and actually go through the exact floor and just take out that floor. But they're very expensive. And the IDF has said and admitted that while these are low level targets, it's not worth us to use these expensive munitions on these people. So they use what they call dumb bombs,
Right.
which they just drop them and take out the whole building,
Right.
completely regardless. So you have this very questionable citizen where their own criteria is that if there's killing one low level target, kill 20 innocents, then it's okay, it's approved. And there have been strikes where they've killed 300 civilians in one. So this 20 is obviously not a firm red line for the IDF.
Right.
Yeah, I was reading it and I was just this is it's terrifying. Just
Right.
imagine living in this world where you can just be marked by some AI system,
Hmm.
and it just says that okay, this person is marked for death because they
Right.
have a score of 92, and then it gets fed to a system. Not only is this person marked for death, you're marked for death when you go home, not when
Right.
you're out by yourself in the
Right.
field. We wait till you go into your home and with your whole family. And that's why you hear these horrible stories of complete generations of families being wiped out at once.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know if there's a question I have with this. It's just awful.
Yeah,
It's horrifying.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing. Well, first of all, too, is it in the end it doesn't do anything. It doesn't get the real Hamas, the fighters who are deep underground and are really beyond the reach of Lavender and any of their programs. They're not going, uh, you know, wandering around the streets or um, they're not in any office buildings or returning to their homes. They're deep underground in these tunnels, and again, so Lavender is a program that is directed at the civilian population. I mean, it's a genocide program. It's what it is. Maybe that wasn't the intention, but it's kind of hard to believe that they didn't understand what was going on. But you just think of this horrifying fact that this is we've been watching the carnage over the last several months, and it just like you say recently, thanks to this whistleblower, we've learned what was behind it, or
Mhm.
that it was AI generated
Right.
carnage. Of course, that does not absolve the Israeli government of any culpability in this matter. Clearly they knew what was happening, but I think probably it gave themselves the illusion of some sort of progress. This program's telling us that we're getting, Hamas operatives. Okay, yeah, there's collateral damage, but we don't care. We're making progress thanks to Lavender.
Right.
Yeah.
You can also see how it almost makes it easier for you to commit a genocide because it's like, well, the computer says so, and
Right,
the computer's right. We have a tendency to put a lot of trust and belief
right,
in technology. And like I said, I use AI all the time, and I will just type things in, and it generates stuff, and I just assume that it's always correct, and that's been a mistake
right,
because it's been bad, especially with things like math. But they're using it just for, like you said, it's an assassination AI tech, a genocidal AI technology. And it's just so crazy that we've been freaking out in the West about the idea of a social credit system, which I agree is scary. And then there are these possibilities of it happening. But here we have the most terrifying use of AI, where it's
right.
churning out people to kill and it feeds it directly to a system that kills people with their families when they're
Right.
home. It's
Yeah,
just, I don't know. It's just, it's
yeah,
scary. And hopefully this gets more attention. I'm not sure. I first heard of Lavender maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and then I just read this story that I think came out 5 days ago
that
on
sounds right. Yeah,
972. So I think that it's a new breaking thing. Hopefully, people will realize what's
yeah.
happening, and
Well,
that these people.
again, I think you don't hold your breath about the mainstream media anyway. You're not going to
Yeah.
see it reported in any
Well,
meaningful way.
Well, I was watching MSNBC yesterday or 2 days ago, and there was this it's a show called Iman AYMN. It's very popular, and I was surprised that they were covering the World Kitchen Center aid workers being killed and
World
diving in.
Central Kitchen. Yeah.
Well, I think it's World Kitchen Center
Yeah.
WKC.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm
A lot of.
pretty positive.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's what. Okay. Anyway, I've
um,
seen it actually described as both. So who
you're,
knows?
you're not infallible.
Okay. Yeah. Well, no, definitely not.
well,
Neither AI nor
yeah.
myself.
But they really tore into to the Israelis, the IDF. They were just saying how terrible this was, and they
Yeah,
talked about this
I
is
think
it's
they suffered some real harm. Yeah, from that. Yeah,
right,
that
and
got
really
through. Yeah.
really torn to Biden as well. It was a big piece, 30
Mm.
minutes, really
Interesting. Okay.
kind of just saying like this is just how terrible it is, and then they went into the fact that it didn't start with just these 7 white people that
Yeah.
died, that
Right.
hundreds of aid workers have been targeted
Right.
and killed.
Right.
I was surprised to see it. It was a long piece, so I think
Interesting. Well, good. That's encouraging. You asked me yesterday or the other day if there was any encouraging trends, and I would say this is one of them. That
hmm,
actually, finally, we're starting to hear, some real um, solid, truthful criticism of Israeli policies. I mean, the reality, that's been veiled so long, and the reality of Palestine is finally, parts of it are being revealed to the public
right.
now.
Well, it's being revealed on, I think, on the left.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
right is still very Zionist, and it's frustrating. The right is conservative, more Christian, but
Right.
they are just fully behind. At least
Right.
the mainstream media, Fox
Yeah.
News.
Right.
You're seeing a breakthrough on progressive media.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. No, yeah, no, I know it's uh, quite obvious.
hmm.
Um,
But this also just where I'll switch gears a little bit and bring this over to U.S. politics. It's also, I think, just shows just a horrible miscalculation by Biden. He has the chance to appeal to the progressive base by being compassionate and trying
right.
to, and he has the ability. This is one thing that piece on MSNBC was talking about. Just like Biden could stop this at any time.
Yeah.
He provides the munitions, and we every day we just send him more and more bombs. And I just think this has killed him. This has killed Biden. I don't see him walking away from this, because actually, even Trump has said some things that said like the Israel's getting a little out of control,
Right.
and they needed to do this
Yeah, I would
fast.
advise them not to do it like the way they're doing it. Yeah.
Right. So even Trump. So now Biden is on the wrong side of this, even compared to Trump, who is very pro-Israel and Zionist. So I think this will kill. If this should end Biden's chances. If it doesn't, Ukraine will. The combination of the two,
Uh-huh.
I think, have kind of sealed the deal, barring some miracle, or if they end up assassinating Trump. But who knows?
Uh-huh.
um, yeah. Okay, well, where should we go to next? Um,
Well,
how are things on the Ukraine front? Do we want to touch that, or do we want to still discuss more about what's happening?
yeah.
And
Well, I think it's just this whole issue of like the left right split. I mean, it's just, I find it's really, I find the whole left right split to be, I mean, it's real. It describes some real differences in the way people view the world, but then it's also artificial. And it often just becomes a barrier to real understanding. And so, as you mentioned, that unfortunately there's a lot of support, very solid support for Israel on the right. Um, I think it's something that grows out. People are drawn into politics or become, let's say, learn to rely on certain news sources because there's something that maybe they experience personally, and they find, okay, well, this person told me the truth about that. So let's say on the right, there are a lot of people who came out of the whole COVID craziness, just very, very suspicious of mainstream, left wing news sources, and came to go to other sources on the right, which they felt, and I think they were correct. All in all, we're giving them the truth, giving them reliable, solid information. So anyway, we develop these loyalties. It's quite natural, and but it's just life.
yeah,
We'd like to think that there's a simple line that divides red from blue, and on one side, depending if we're left liberal, we just assume all the crazies and all the lies are over on the red side, and vice versa, right? But just life isn't that simple. You can have a news source that is really quite reliable in so many different ways, and you come to trust it. But it doesn't mean that the world is a big, complicated place. And it will, so you had these people that were, I think, all in all, we're doing good when it came to a lot of domestic issues, but they were also very closely tied with the Zionists.
Hmm.
And so people, who have come to trust these news sources, when this comes, of course, it's deeper than that. We've talked about Christian Zionism and so on and so forth. I'm kind of just dealing with one aspect of the problem. But now I've come to trust this news source. Okay, now this new um, story, kind of hits the headlines. It's October 7th, and now the attack on Gaza. Well, I'm not going to listen to MSNBC.
Right.
We know they're just liars. And all these people are protesting. Yeah, well, they were protesting about, I remember the Black Lives Matters protests and transgender, and that was just all crazy. And I looked into it at the time. It was crazy. It's the same people. I'm not listening,
Right.
and that's what you see. And it's actually very unfortunate because, again, life is more complicated than that, and it's not a simple line that divides good from evil. And we just have to take the responsibility to look into, to every story and understand it on its own merits.
Right. Yeah. It's just the problem with identity politics, this
Tribalism, yeah,
tribalism. It's like, this is
right.
my team, and I will just support them no matter what. And anything the other side guy says is, they're on the other team. They're the bad guys. It's so silly. It's so, it's so stupid. Like, I don't identify with a political party. There are things on the right that I like. There's things on the left I like. Um, but I think more and more people are waking up to it, but it's too hard. It's kind of ingrained in our system to choose a tribe, and so I don't know. What would a solution this be? Is there a way to break out of this system, of
Well,
this Republican Democrat?
no, I think
They're
the
just
problem is that well, yeah, well, all I can hope for is that, yeah, it's good that people are becoming increasingly skeptical of of our government, and the problem is that as we can see, they can end up their skepticism can actually draw them into new delusions.
hmm,
And I think that's always a risk. I don't know that there's a simple solution,
I
other than just constant education. And it's eventually, you hope that the truth will leak out.
right.
That there's so many of these horrific images and facts that are coming out about Gaza right now, that it took a while to actually break through. It's great that MSNBC that ran that long piece, but they wouldn't have done that a couple of months ago. But I think there was sort of like this constant pressure, or this is just the information and the images, and it was overwhelming, and it was a truth that couldn't be hidden. This is a truth that's first appearing on the left, but let's hope that it continues to spread across the spectrum.
Yeah, I hope it does come across the right. Yeah, the way I kind of view the world now is almost kind of, instead of left and right, it's more the people versus the state. It's That's kind of how I see it. It's like, I like anti-establishment characters. Because I always feel like with our system, it's like choosing between Pepsi and Coke, between the left and the right.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, the foreign policy stays the same. The government spending keeps on going up. We fight over kind of small things that really don't affect our day to day lives. These little culture issues. But now I think about it, like, if there's a character that is anti-establishment, and I don't know if Trump is that character. I think Vivek was a bit of that character, but Trump showed us that he was an establishment guy.
Oh yeah,
The
through and through.
last, so is there any hope for that this time around it would be different? Because it looks like Trump will be our president. I
Right.
mean,
I don't. I know people are hopeful that he'll institute some real reforms. I've become very, very cynical about Trump because, um, I saw what he did. It's not that everything he did, during his first term was wrong. He didn't break every promise, but he certainly broke a lot of them. And in general, he he brought in the same old, um, the same old swamp creatures to run the. There really wasn't any clearing out of the draining of the swamp. They were not close to it, and in fact, we saw a lot of things get worse. Things that where you promised to make a difference. For example, with the relations with Russia. Again, it's sort of crazy because the Democrats are still screaming or somehow implying. I don't know what they really believe, that somehow he was, in cahoots with Russia. But when he was president, he pursued policies that were very harmful to Russia. In Ukraine, by flooding the country with weapons and if anything, he was much. He caused more damage to U.S.-Russia relations than Obama did. I mean, this is the facts, but it's sort of funny. It's just like there's a whole, there's an image that he has that's shared by both right and left that doesn't have anything to do with the reality. And like you're saying, often that these things are, it's assumed that there's some sort of stark difference, but certainly when it comes to foreign policy, there just doesn't. You just never see much of a difference. For example, when Biden came in, the idea, a lot of people expected that he would pursue a much more conciliatory policy towards China. After Trump had been very hostile, towards China, had imposed all kinds of trade sanctions and so on and so forth. But there was just no real difference. Actually, from day one, it showed that they just picked up the baton and continued the same way.
Right. So U.S.-China relations are even worse now than they were under Trump. Now, it's with what we're doing with Taiwan, putting troops there and antagonizing China. So
So a lot of these arguments, I mean, they just seem to be in the realm of make-believe. This idea that's that somehow Trump is going to be is in bed with the Russians, and he's but I don't see that there's going to be any difference.
Yeah, I think too many people believe Trump is going to be their savior and turn this country around. But if you just see how much he spent during his 4 years here, increased the government debt, and like he said, his foreign policy was also quite hawkish, aggressive towards. I wouldn't say hawkish because he didn't start any new wars in the Middle East and try to turn things down a little bit there, but
a little bit. I mean, he pretty much continued the war.
It sounded like he made an attempt, but the generals just said no, and he just kind of let it happen.
Well, there are a few times, for example, actually, the negotiations, the attempt to, have talks with Kim Jong-un, right? Was that was to be lauded. I mean, that was, but again, it was sabotaged.
I guess the only thing that maybe I would say to Trump's credit that why he might be better than Biden is that Trump obviously has a willingness to talk to people. He likes to talk. Biden doesn't seem to be capable of talking with other world leaders. Maybe he's just not mentally capable, or he just doesn't want to. He's not making any effort to talk to people like Putin, where I believe Trump would. And it seems like Trump has such a large ego. He likes people to like him. And I feel like he may say some things, but then once he starts talking to the guy, I think the chance of nuclear war goes down. That's my only hope. But in terms of of turning the country around, I just don't see it happening under Trump. I definitely don't see it happening under Biden. I just don't think there's any turning it around at all. Maybe I'm being too cynical. Perhaps do you think someone like RFK is more of an anti-establishment character that would drain the swamp a bit more? He's proven to be beholden by AIPAC and a strong Zionist. But otherwise, do you feel like he would actually, dismantle some of the security state that we have in the United States?
Well, I guess I would have to say so. I really soured on him because of his just uncompromising support for Israel in the face of this genocide. I found it difficult to stomach. But I have to. The truth is that he's no worse than his the other candidates when it comes to Israel. Biden and Trump are just as bad.
Right.
So yeah, well. the thing is, Trump will make anti-establishment noises, but he just doesn't seem to have I think, the maybe the intellectual discipline or the moral character or something to really carry through. I mean,
Mm,
he says stuff, he tweets stuff, and then nothing happens, and then he ends up actually contradicting himself later. So I hear something and say, "Hey, yeah, that's true," but oh yeah, that's Trump.
mm,
That's. But in the case, RFK does seem like a much more thoughtful person to me, who's given these matters a lot of thought and done real research and has a real grasp of what's going on. And he believes strongly that his uncle was assassinated by the CIA.
mm.
So I mean, he has real skin in the game. He has it's personal for him, and so I think, yeah, you're right. He might actually, if he by some miracle became president, he might actually dismantle, or at least he would attempt to.
I was
You're
about to
afraid you're going
say,
to see another assassination, but
if you go to war with the CIA, who wins?
yeah,
Like does the
right.
executive branch, the
What's it Schumer said that like they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you.
right? And everybody kind of knows that,
Right.
deep down. So it'll be interesting you know, if someone that is truly dedicated to dismantling the security state, like the CIA and the NSA,
Right.
if he's actually able to do it. Is it even possible at this state? And if it's not, then we're moving more rapidly toward this dystopian Orwellian future where we are being controlled and surveilled, and your speech is being censored. Um, it is scary to see
Yeah.
what will happen, and if someone tries to go after the deep state. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. No, I don't think that the deep state would take kindly to that. And yeah.
hmm. Yeah, I guess what you can say, what the one good thing Trump did is that he sort of caused an allergic reaction that exposed the deep
Right.
state. The deep state just all of a sudden tried to just couldn't stomach him and just
Right.
just showed their true colors, and everybody was
Right.
like, "Wow,
Right. It
the
was
deep state is
actually,
real."
yeah, right. It's the overreaction was actually that he provoked. It woke up a lot of people, including myself. I mean, there was a lot of things I wasn't aware of until, Russiagate and so on. It was really startling, the extent to which, these unelected bureaucrats, were able to kind of, go out and all nearly bring down an elected president. It was,
Banana Republic stuff,
yeah, yeah.
right? Well, do you think there's any way to save the system, or do you think the system just has to collapse at this point? Because that's almost kind of like if you come to the conclusion that there is no turning the ship around,
Yeah.
is it better that the ship just crashes first and
Yeah,
then
I
you
guess
got
that's the conclusion that I've reached. I think it just seems like the people that are still in the system there's so few of them who are really clear eyed. Are not corrupted, haven't been corrupted by the system. The people, that the truth speakers, they're all on the outside. They've all been deplatformed or fired or um, um, have passed over for jobs. I'm just thinking just one example. Again, these are very talented people like Chas Freeman, who was the interpreter for Nixon during his uh, meeting with Mao Zedong, and just a top level, all around a top drawer kind of person, a top, um, extremely smart. He had I think it was was it under Obama? I think it was that he was being considered for a position within the State Department, and that was shot down. It's just like anybody who's going to speak the truth, no matter how well qualified, and there was nobody more well qualified than him, is not going to be allowed to come anywhere near the levers of power.
Mm,
That's what. So I just think at this point that's true. We're talking about RFK. Okay, RFK's got his problems, but he is a real threat to the system. I don't think there's any way he's going to get close to the levers of power. I think the system is just so thoroughly corrupt that, like you say, it just has to crash, and we just got to pick up the pieces somehow and start over.
Okay, well then that by that logic, probably having someone like Biden steering the ship is probably the best way to crash it, right? He's
Yeah,
asleep at the
right.
wheel, so
Yeah, yeah. Oh, but it's scary. I mean, the thing is, yeah, I yeah, no, it's a terrifying situation. I mean, there's like, there's, it's exciting in a way. I guess that's why we're having these conversations, because anything seems possible. You feel like you're on the brink of you see a whole new world emerging. That's um, before our eyes, but it's emerging, in this earthquake, and and it's a violent kind of birth that's taking place right here, and it could become much more violent. God, willing, it will not, but there's forever that that potential with, we're seeing it overseas, but God forbid, it,
Hmm.
it could happen here too.
Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't allow people over the age of 65 run the country. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You have Biden is nearing his deathbed. Why does he get to decide the fate of the world? It's not right. His time is over, so he may not give a damn if the world blows up, you
Right,
know? I mean, Trump's not a spring chicken either. I mean,
right,
he's
right. Yeah,
it's
I think
wild.
65 is maybe too low. I'm only 3 years away
Well,
from
I'm
that,
sorry.
but well, actually, I feel I don't have the energy to do something like that. But some
70
65,
then,
yeah,
okay?
okay,
Even
well,
then, I mean, I feel
yeah,
like, I mean, we saw Mitch McConnell just have a straight up system reboot in the middle of a
yeah,
press
some
conference,
kind
right?
of mini
Middle,
stroke or something,
right.
right?
So
Yeah,
it's
right.
just crazy that we have all these
Yeah,
old farts that
yeah.
just
No,
don't want to
it's
let
really
go of
right,
power,
right.
and they get to decide the lives of my life and the life of my children, and
Yeah,
it's wrong.
yeah,
I don't like this system. We need a new one.
yeah,
And so, yeah, maybe, yeah, I agree. A complete system reboot is what we need. I think the only choice is a collapse, but collapses are scary. And so,
yeah.
foundations are appearing in the cracks.
Our cracks are
Oh,
very.
sorry. Cracks are appearing in the foundation, and let's see how it comes crumbling down. It
Uh-huh.
may not all be at once. It'll be interesting to document. I find it so fascinating that we were living through this time, and it's also fascinating that so many people just don't seem to realize or care.
Yeah,
But every day, more and more people are waking up to it as it becomes more and more obvious that something is seriously wrong.
right,
And when the building starts to fall, it could fall fast. So
right.
um, we'll be here to talk about it. Okay. Well, we'll stop here, and this will most likely be the last episode for this week because I will be in the hospital and taking care of my wife and your grandson and my new son. So.
Right.
Um, so that will also be exciting. Next time we have a talk, there'll be another member of our family. Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dad.